How's it going, everyone? I want to go over new version 10.2. It just has a few small improvements or add-ins from version 10.1. Version 10.1 being the Google Sheets version of the Ultimate Golf Clash Calculator. Version 10.2, I want to go over the few things that were added and explain it to you right now. So the first thing that I added in to version 10.2 is that now I added in over here in the main Ultimate Golf Clash Calculator sheet is a table, well, not a table, a listing of actual slider percentages for every club. The other versions, I've never had it in it because I know that the calculator is accurate in the way it's coming up and calculating the slider percentages. It's not necessary to have a table or numbers at all because the calculator generates that number for you. So if I put 50% in this slider percentage for the shot, the rings to pull automatically gets recalculated. Or if I'm at 100% slider and I count 10 rings back from max, I'll put 100% in the slider, 10 rings back, and the calculator already does a percentage for you. Or I'm at min, I counted up 15 rings, so I'll be at 0. I count up 15 rings. Oops, excuse me, wrong place. It'll be from the min. 15 rings. And the calculator automatically does it for you in the background. And why it's not needed, why you don't need to have a table generated or the actual slider number is because you don't need to re-input it anyway. If you did it in the other version where you wanted to have the number and then you need to put it in, it's not necessary because you're already putting in the input required at 0. I'm at min 0%, and I have 15 rings from min. That's all you should have to put in and get the number you need to pull because there's a time constraint. You don't want to be trying to find what that slider number is and inputting that again or looking at a table. But I do understand that without having some indication of where your slider is at, in a sense, this is like some kind of magic box. You would have to put your trust into the calculator to believe it's coming up with the right numbers. So, and I understand that. Understand that it can be of use and comfort to see what the actual numbers are being used for your shot. And while we're on the subject of the slider percent and we're talking about it, I do want to go over quickly just some of the basics of it again. That you see here, 0% slider or 100% slider like any other calculator. But it also has the slider offsets. So just to cover again what's in the user guide really quickly, if I could, is that you have two base numbers that this slider number is based off of. Off the main one that you will always use, your basic slider input, or the plus yard number indicator. So if let's take a look at this. For 100, and I put 1 in the plus yard number indicator, you can see that the slider number percentage has changed to the plus 1 yard mark. For Cat 8, it's 75.9, and the rest of the clubs show the slider percentage as well. But what I want to show you is that when you have a number inputted here, it overrides the slider percentage. So I can put anything in here and nothing is changing because it's overridden, right? So in a sense, as I was mentioning, you have two base numbers that the calculator works with. The slider percentage, or if you put something in the plus yard indicator entry, it'll override the slider percentage number. Okay. Now with that, if you only have something in the slider percentage, the offsets will offset this number. So 100%. The offset simply is how do I adjust the slider forward or back from where I'm inputting or I'm saying my slider percentage. So max being 100%, I count 10 rings back, right? That'll get you, say you're working with a Falcon, you'd be at 87.5% at P3. Or same thing, if you're concentrating on your Falcon, you now at min, you realize, and now I count 12 rings forward. Now your Falcon will be at 9.2%. And of course, the rings to pull is recalculated for this slider percentage at 9.2%. What I also want to show you is if you had something in plus yard, the plus yard number, the offsets will also offset the plus yard indication as well. So we're at 75. Let's take a look at, let's look at APOC, 75.4% on the slider percentage that's being used in the calculator because you're at the plus 1 yard mark with the APOC. Now, if I put minus 10 in the slider offset at max, the ring size at max, you'll see that it gets adjusted to 39.2%. So, and that can be very useful too. So say you are in a pro shot with a B52 and you're kind of trying to line up your landing spot, and instead of having to sweep or count rings, you notice that, hey, where I want to land is maybe on the fringe, and you do notice that, hey, my plus 1 indication actually shows up on the green, so that I'm about 4 rings off of the fringe. Well, you just put plus 1, and you offset yourself back. You bring the slider back by 4 rings, and you know you're near max, so you use the ring offset at max. Right? And that's, the slider offset will offset the plus 1 yardage, plus, I keep saying plus, the plus yard number entry. And again, same thing, because something is here, the slider percentage is being ignored. Nothing would change any of your settings. Right? Okay. And the other thing, let's move on to the other change or improvement or that was added into version 10.2 is with your whole notes. I added in an entry here, or an area where you can put something I'm calling the whole ID. So what the whole ID will do is, based on your whole notes that you entered into the whole nut sheet, you can put an ID number next to the whole, the tour and the whole. So in this case, I just put numbers directly down. I just populated it from 1 all the way down. And what that will do is that when you're playing a hole and it comes up, say you're waiting for your shot to come up, you turn down a shootout. Oh, okay. Well, I'm on turn 12. Just so happened this, what I call the 3 traps island hole, comes up. So what you can do is you can highlight with the whole ID anything in this shot list. So if I want to pull up this one, 9, which is 45, which was down at 45 degrees and 15.3 miles per hour, I would just put 9 in the whole ID, and I'll bring it to the top. Just like now the other filters, just to go review. This will be a little quick review again on the whole note sheet. The whole note sheet, if nothing is entered in the whole ID, there still is a filter being applied. What it's doing is it'll look for any entry that you put all in the angle and all in the spin. So you can see that by me putting that in the whole notes, it automatically gets searched for and brought to the top. Another thing which will bring it to the top is if you input the angle and you put the wind and you have it in your, go back to the whole note sheet, you have the setting saying, I want to find any shot that's within 1 degree plus or minus and within 1 mile per hour plus or minus. So we can look at the first one, say 10 and 12.8. I put 10 or even 13, right? It brought up the first shot to the top of the list because they met this criteria. Or let's look for another one. Maybe this 135 at 11.5 miles per hour. So I'll put 135, I'll put 12. And it brought that shot to the top to highlight it. So you just, wanted to add the whole ID because there are times when it can be useful where you just want to pull up a specific shot that you want to look for. When you see something on the list, you say, "Oh, what is this? What image do I have here?" If you put 7 in the whole ID, it'll bring it up, and the image will be expanded. It might be some setup notes that you had, and additional ones, or maybe just you populate everything with images. Another, and just to continue on with the whole ID and how it works, let's take a look at an example. So let's look at the whole notes. In fact, I made a couple of just an example down here where the ID numbers. One is I made a hole called Apple. The tour is called ID numbers example. So I have a hole called Apple and a hole called oranges. And I repeat the ID number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. You can repeat the number for every hole. And so let's go to that. Got ID number example. Let's go to Apple. So it doesn't have to be unique. What it should be is you should have unique IDs per hole and per tour. So you can reuse ID numbers. So I just want to make that clear. And so what that will be useful for is if you wanted to say you didn't want to use the wind direction feature and you're more comfortable playing, and I can understand that you've invested a lot of time and you have your system and your method, and you just feel more comfortable with the basic ring model. And if you remember from the instruction, the user guide, to turn off the wind direction feature of the Ultimate Golf Flash calculator, you just enter 90 if you're in the units of degrees, or 15 minutes if you're in the units of clock, or in degrees now. So 90, pure crosswind. Now the calculator is basically like any other calculator. Of course, you still have all these additional features where you can use a slider offset to help you dial in shots, and also the whole notes. So I want to bring up an example of what you could possibly do with that. So there's a lot of guides out there, and I know many people use tour guides now. I never use it. I just rely on the calculator to make my own setups. But there are a lot of people that feel comfortable with tour guides. So what you could do is, using the ID, you could set up. And I have a guide example here. I have one hole for the guide example called dog leg, and you could set up. And generally, a guide gives you 8 setups: one for headwind, one for right to left headwind, one for right crosswind, one for right to left tailwind, etc. So you have going around the clock, going around in the circle. You got you'll have 8 different setups. So you could do that with this with using the whole notes and the whole ID. So on this one, I put 1 dogleg. I put a little picture of an arrow here, being tailwind. You can set up any way you want. 2, the name of the whole dogleg. I put some images here to show you. 3, 4. You kind of get the idea. So you can set it up this way, and so that when a hole comes up, you can enter 1, and this will be for tailwind. 2, you see 2 is here. This is for right to left headwind. And so you put 2. Of course, you can number it any way you want, whatever makes sense to you. 2. I just have a random image that I put in here. It got expanded up there. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it'll be useful for you to that. For people that just like to use guides, you can populate all of these fields with pictures if you want, notes, setups, images, and you'll be able to call it very quickly, and it'll be right in front of you for ease of pulling it up and be easy to use. So that's about the basic new things that were put into version 10.2. I'll be releasing it very soon, and I appreciate you listening. All right, thanks.